Hello and welcome. My name is Kat Moonchild. I am a psychic medium, Reiki master, teacher, shaman. I've been doing it for 20 years this year. Woohoo, welcome. So today what we're going to be doing is we are going to be talking about altars. It's a really simple introduction video. I kept this one really kind of comfortable, really casual, because it's something that I think is important that we understand more the point of the altar rather than the particular of how it should be set up. But I did go through a quick introduction on how to set up an altar according to what we're trying to do. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first altar we're going to be covering is your traditional pagan altar or Wiccan altar. So in the north, you'll have things representing earth. So as you can see, I have what I would connect with my power animal, some flowers, and a stone. South would be representing fire. East would be representing air, so that's where you would put your incense. West would be representing water. That's why I added additionally some of these, like seashells for the water, feathers to represent air. You can also connect it to represent with angels. As you see, I went more with an Asianic theme. You can definitely switch out more so, especially if you're working with specific deities, adding those deities. If you have certain statues or things, you want to place them energetically, these representations of you, your practice, and your beliefs, where you feel drawn or connected to. You want to pay attention to the energies that it's evoking. You want to pay attention to how it's affecting you emotionally. I personally like to put things representing spirit in the center. That's just how I am. As you see, I have the wheel too, and the pentagram as well. You would use this for charging, so I have my wand. And for most people that work traditionally with the god and the goddess representations would be going on the left side. The left side represents the feminine and the right side would be the masculine. So you would put a chalice for the feminine over here, and on the right you would put your athame for the masculine, and you would put it more towards the front. But again, kind of feel your intuition, feel where you feel things belong, because this again is just a rough representation of an altar. By no means do you have to go exactly by what I'm showing you, but again, north is your earth, west is your water, south is your fire, east is your air. If you wanted to switch this up and kind of move more with a feng shui representation, you would be working with wood, metal, air, water, and fire. And you can place things again with those particular 5 elements, even though you have the 4 directions representing the 4 different elements with spirit. This is a 5 elemental representation that I'm showing you. You'll have the 5 elements also represented, and you can do it in the pentagram design if you want to do the feng shui, or you can follow traditional feng shui through Taoist representation. You're going to want to look that up because I'm not the strongest in feng shui, but you can easily look up feng shui information for which direction is which for the corresponding elements if you wanted to switch this up. As you also see, I have something like a tapestry or an altar cloth. Altar cloths do keep this clean, and you want to keep your altar clean, tidy. You don't want it dusty. You want to at least do an energetic cleaning and a physical cleaning once a month on your altar. And remember, altars are sacred spaces, so they're going to be very high vibrational. They're going to have a lot of energy. You may occasionally get the sense to move something out, put something back in. You can keep it as simple as this, or you can make it as elaborate as you want. But the most important thing that you're doing is that you're following the energetic representations and you're following your intuition. Oftentimes what people will do for their altars is they will do something like a crystal bowl full of water for a water representation. I do have moon water in here for my representation. This is charged moon water. A lot of people like to add salt to their water bowls to consecrate it and bless their water bowls as their representation for water. For fire, you do tend to have a candle to represent fire in the south. In the east, again, you have your incense. And incense connects because the energy is really in the smoke. The energy is really in the smell. So that's where we're connecting with the energy of air. And north, people don't always use stones. You can also use a bowl of salt to represent the earth as well. You can put an actual plant, a living plant. You can put a bowl full of crystals in there. You can put a bowl full of dirt. Some people actually use straight up dirt or sand to represent their earth element. And you can use anything you want in the center. As far as representation for spirit, you can put a statue of a deity in the center. I like to put my right now I'm using bodhisattvas, but you can put representations of your statues wherever you feel drawn to putting them. We also want to remember when we're working with altars that this is a sacred space. So it's going to be very high vibrational. You don't want to have your altars in places like your bedroom. If you do put it in your bedroom, put it in your closet, because that's going to be where you're sleeping, and it can cause astral travel, dreaming. It can make it so you're actually not getting enough rest. So you want to be sure that you're putting your altar someplace away from where you're sleeping. And additionally, again, you want to put your sacred items on here to charge. So altars are very high vibrational. I suggest opening sacred space before setting your altar and leaving your altar open as a sacred space. So there's always a direct connection to spirit. Now, I'm going more so with a very, very simple representation of an ancestral altar. I have pictures of family. I have an offering bowl where I would put flowers, tobacco. It has to be sacred tobacco. Most of the time, if you can't use sacred tobacco, you would use sakar. You can use things like cinnamon. And depending on the lineage you're connecting with offerings, you can use different things as prescribed by that particular lineage. Oftentimes, offerings are red and white flowers, yellow flowers, sometimes purple flowers. You do also have a representation of ancestor and skull. And even though I moved some of these things around, I still kept the idea of healing involved by invoking some ascended masters. So when we're working with ancestors and ancestral altars, we want to use things that encourage healing. So you would want to put stones on your altar that would encourage healing in your family, in your lineage, candles that would represent healing for your family. You can put foods down on your altar as an offering to your ancestors. And as you see, there's not so much focus on elements here. You can do an ancestral altar that incorporates elements, but the most important thing is that we're putting things that are associated with family. So you'd want to put things that have sentimental value and associate with family, such as the pictures. You can put heirloom items like pocket watches, if you have like a father's pocket watch, or jewelry on the altar as well, if you feel it's safe to do so. But you do want things that represent family. You can also put not just pictures, but you can actually draw out your family tree. Now, when you're working with ancestors, the things you want to know is that oftentimes ancestors can be mildly demanding, want things, ask for specific things for the altar. So this is going to be an altar that you're very interactive with, and something that you definitely want to keep up with, because this is the point. You're doing ancestral healing, so you're providing what your ancestors need in order to heal. This is going to be a much more moving altar. This is going to be something that is changed around. Your ancestors may want the offering bowl in front of their representation so that it brings them comfort. You can use things like these to represent the angels. I like to add things that incorporate the healing, such as things that would represent the angels. A lot of people like to use a picture of Archangel Michael or sigils of Archangel Michael on their altar to help bring protection into the family as well. And that's going to be something that helps support your lineage, your actual bloodline, and healing in the bloodline. You can do things that are directly connected individualistically to your lineage as well, or your bloodline as well. Things that represent where your family came from, things that represent their beliefs, their culture, and their traditions that would go on the altar as well. And when you're actually invoking ancestor, one of the most powerful things is you want to invoke ascended ancestors, which are the ancestors that have crossed over. When you beseech ancestors for assistance and guidance and healing, because not all ancestors align with us or agree with us or really have fully healed. So when we're working with ancestors in our daily life and our daily spiritual practice, and we're beseeching our ancestors to assist us, we want to ask for the ancestors that have healed. So as you see, altar is not that much different. I would still have like the Virgin Guadalupe, Mother Mary invoked in this altar for her compassion, her maternal energy. I do have a lot of things representing peace and protection here anyway. So even though I used a lot of the same iconography in the other altar that I showed you with the representations that were available, I still do have things like my tapestry. Oftentimes we use things like purple. You can use color, but purple, black, and white. Most of the time, white is best for an ancestral altar as opposed to this purple color, but purple is considered a very spiritual one. You can use black for protection or white as a representation of purity or spirit. Some lineages don't like the color black, so oftentimes it is recommended you use a white altar cloth instead when you're creating your altar. We can also do things like create traveling altars. Traveling altars are things that are basically things you would pack in a bag, and traveling altars tend to have small statues about that size. They tend to have tea light candles as opposed to the large votive candles. Of course, your flame, your lighter, you want to stick to one lighter as your sacred flame when you're working with an altar. You also will have things that represent earth, air, and fire. So you can have a bag of sea salt in there. You can have your incense in your little travel bag. And for water, you can have just a bottle of water. It's not something that has to be major. You can actually just put a bottle of water in your bag to represent actual water. So in case you ever need to do a little quick magic, you can have a bag filled with all of that. So this is kind of just a quick explanation of altars. As you see, altars are very flexible. They're not difficult. They're easy to create. A lot of people overthink it and they're more focused on the aesthetic. Something like this would be a perfect altarpiece, or you can go even more elaborate and have things in your altar that are more classy or dynamic. I don't think I want to use the word classy, but more aesthetic, more expensive, but that's absolutely not necessary. You don't have to go crazy on your altar. Simple altars are just as effective because the real point of the altar is a representation of ourselves, of our belief, of our connection to our practice, and additionally, how it feels to us. We want to really pay attention to the energy that we're interacting with when we're creating our altars. That's the most important part, is how does this altar make me feel? Does it feel right? Don't be afraid to move things around. Don't be afraid to reset your altar. Don't be afraid to work with it, because the more you work with it, the more intention you put into your altar. The more intention you put into the altar, the more powerful the altar is. So it's important that we're feeling the energetic connection to the altar more so than what we're actually putting on it. For younger kids or younger people, people will use things like tea light candles instead of actual candles. The electric tea light candles for safety as a representation of fire, or have the child draw a picture of a flame. If we're wanting to allow our children to create an altar, we can get we can definitely get, creative with that. Feathers, just the feathers themselves without the incense, if we want to avoid, especially if we're working with young children like 6 years old, we don't want anything breakable or fragile on that. We may not want to put water on their altar because it may spill. But they're more than welcome to have pictures of like ocean animals or a picture of the ocean itself, especially if you allow the child to draw those pictures. That puts that energy into the altar. You can have a more angel-based theme in the altar for the child. Especially if the child is not working with deity or the child does not have anything in connection with deity. If we're making something like a fairy altar for the children or for ourselves, rather than focusing on the elements, we can do things like put things like our shiny things like tin foil, the little bottles of gold, fairy statues. My fairy altars traditionally did not have any focus on direction, but had more focus on aesthetic, shiny stones, just shiny, and offerings to fairies. So if if you're wanting to do something like a fairy altar or a dragon altar, you can definitely incorporate the elements, but that's something that isn't necessary. That's not something we have to do. The traditional pagan altar that I showed you, where I was talking about having like the chalice and the athame, which is your sacred ceremonial dagger. I had my wand on my altar. Those are things that are more in the traditional sense. For those that want to be more traditional, it's completely appropriate, completely fine. But not all altars are created equal, and they really shouldn't be, because as I said, this is almost like a vision board of our spirituality. So it's something we should get creative with and have fun with, because the more we're enjoying it and the less nervous we are about whether or not we're getting it right, the bigger connection we have to the altar, because it feels good. And an altar should feel good. It should feel about us. It should feel something that is about ourselves, and should be something that we're connecting to on a deeper level. Now that we've gone through altars, I think that's pretty much it. As you see, altars are not complicated. They're super simple. You can Google example traditional altars if you're more ritualistic, or you can have fun with it. There's no wrong, there's no right. You can definitely, if you're like head witch, kitchen witch, you can use herbs. You can put your apothecary behind it. It's only going to increase the power. So the more stuff that you incorporate as a connection with yourself, the stronger the altar is. Just enjoy yourself, have fun. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell notification for the next video that I put out. And I guess I'll see you all guys around. Thanks for joining me on learning to create altars, basic introduction to altars. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below. Love you all. Have a blessed day.